In the vast expanse of space, humanity's dream of colonizing distant worlds turned into a nightmare. The year was 2157, and Earth had launched its most ambitious project yet, Operation Seedling. 12 massive colony ships, each carrying 50,000 civilians, departed for different star systems. These were not just ships, they were arcs of hope, bearing the future of humanity. Then came the Saturday. On a quiet Tuesday morning, alarms blared across every space monitoring station on Earth and its off-world bases. The colony ships, spread across light years, were under simultaneous attack. Within hours, all 12 vessels were reduced to space debris, their passengers, men, women, and children, snuffed out in an instant. The attackers were unknown aliens, their motives a mystery. But their message was clear: humanity was not welcome among the stars. As grief turned to rage, an unprecedented event occurred. The squabbling factions of Earth nations, corporations, and independent space colonies united under a single banner. The Callisto Accord was signed, naming Admiral Zircon Frostrender as the supreme commander of the newly formed United Human Defense Force UHDF. This is the story of humanity's retaliation, told through the eyes of 4 men who would shape the course of this interstellar war. Admiral Zircon Frostrender stood on the observation deck of the UHDF flagship, Nemesis, his steely gaze fixed on the holographic display of the Milky Way. At 62, Zircon was a battle-hardened veteran of the Mars Rebellion and the asteroid belt skirmishes. His silver hair was cropped short, and a long scar ran from his left temple to his chin, a reminder of hand-to-hand combat during the Battle of Olympus Mons. "Status report," he barked, his voice gravelly from years of shouting orders in the vacuum of space. Lieutenant Commander Quix Obsidian, a young prodigy in xenotechnology, stepped forward. "Sir, Project Phoenix is at 85% completion. The retrofitting of civilian ships into warships is proceeding faster than expected, thanks to the new nanoforge technology." Zircon nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. "And the Callisto cannon?" Quix hesitated. "It's problematic, sir. The power requirements are astronomical. We're struggling to contain the energy without melting the ship around it." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "I don't want excuses, Obsidian. I want results. That cannon is our best chance against the alien motherships. Make it work." "Yes, Sir," Quix replied, snapping to attention before hurrying off. As Quix left, Captain Helix Stormweaver entered the observation deck. A tactical genius, Helix had been handpicked by Zircon to lead the vanguard of the assault fleet. "Admiral," Helix said, his voice low and intense, "we've received intelligence from our deep space probes. We've located what appears to be an alien outpost in the Tau Ceti system." Zircon's eyes lit up with a fierce gleam. "Excellent work, Stormweaver. Prepare a strike team. I want boots on the ground within 72 hours. This is our chance to gather intel on the enemy." As Helix saluted and turned to leave, Zircon called out, "And Helix, make sure Cipher is on that team. We'll need his unique skills." Helix nodded, a shadow passing over his face at the mention of Cipher. In the bowels of the Nemesis, surrounded by holographic displays and humming servers, sat Cipher Voidwhisper. His pale, gaunt face was illuminated by the glow of countless screens, his fingers dancing across multiple interfaces simultaneously. Cipher was a man of 2 worlds, part human, part machine. Cybernetic implants covered 60% of his body, allowing him to interface directly with computer systems. His ability to hack alien technology had made him invaluable to the UHDF, but it had also made him an outcast among his fellow soldiers. A message flashed across one of his screens. "Cipher, report to Hangar Bay 7 for mission briefing. Capt. Stormweaver." Cipher sighed, disconnecting himself from the ship's systems. As he made his way to the hangar, crew members gave him a wide berth, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. In the hangar, he found Helix waiting with a team of elite soldiers. The captain's eyes narrowed as Cipher approached. "Glad you could join us," Voidwhisper Helix said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "We're heading to Tau Ceti. There's an alien outpost there that needs investigating." Cipher nodded, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on the holographic map of the target. "I assume you'll want me to crack their systems, download everything I can." "That's right," Helix confirmed. "But remember, this is a military operation. You follow my orders to the letter. No cowboy antics like on Titan." Cipher's human eye twitched at the memory. That cowboy antic saved your life, Captain. It also blew our cover and nearly got the entire team killed. Helix snapped back. Just do your job, and we'll do ours. As the team boarded the stealth dropship, Cipher couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would change everything. Little did he know how right he was. The alien outpost on Tau Ceti was a sprawling complex of crystalline structures that seemed to grow out of the planet's rocky surface. As the UHDF stealth dropship descended under the cover of the planet's rings, Helix outlined the plan one last time. Team Alpha, led by me, will secure the perimeter. Team Beta, you're on alien tech retrieval. Cipher, you're with me. We need you to hack into their central computer as soon as possible. The dropship landed silently, and the teams moved out with practiced precision. Helix and Cipher made their way to what appeared to be the main control center, encountering surprisingly little resistance. I don't like this, Helix muttered. It's too easy. Cipher nodded in agreement, his cybernetic implants already reaching out to the alien systems around them. As they entered the control room, they found it empty save for a single, pulsating crystal in the center. That's their version of a computer core, Cipher said, approaching it cautiously. I can interface with it, but it might take some time to. Suddenly, the crystal flared with blinding light. When it faded, a holographic figure stood before them, tall, ethereal, with multiple limbs and eyes that seemed to shift color constantly. Greetings, humans, the figure said, its voice resonating in their minds rather than their ears. We have been expecting you. Helix raised his weapon, but Cipher held up a hand. Wait, he said, this could be our chance to understand why they attacked us. The alien tilted its head, an almost human gesture of curiosity. Attacked. Ah, you refer to the cleansing. A regrettable necessity, I'm afraid. Necessity, Helix snarled. You murdered millions of innocent civilians. To prevent the spread of a greater threat, the alien replied calmly. Your kind carries within you the seeds of a terrible darkness. We had hoped to contain it to your home system, but when you began to spread... Cipher's mind raced, processing the implications. What darkness? What are you talking about? The alien's form shimmered, and suddenly they were surrounded by holographic images, scenes of war, destruction, and chaos from human history. But there was something else, a shadowy presence that seemed to linger in the background of each image. The void hunger, the alien explained. A parasitic consciousness that feeds on conflict and suffering. It has latched onto your species, guiding your development, pushing you towards self-destruction. When you began to colonize other worlds, we had no choice but to act. Helix shook his head in disbelief. That's impossible. We would know if some alien parasite was controlling us. Would you, the alien asked? How much of your history has been shaped by inexplicable violence and cruelty? The void hunger is subtle, working through whispers and suggestions over generations. Cipher stood frozen, his cybernetic systems struggling to process this information. Could it be true? And if it was, what did that mean for humanity's future? Before they could ask more questions, alarms began to blare. The alien's form flickered. More of your kind approach. Violently. We cannot allow the void hunger to spread. I am sorry, but the cleansing must continue. As the hologram vanished, Helix grabbed Cipher's arm. We need to get this information back to Admiral Frostrender. Move. They ran from the control room, their minds reeling from the revelation that would change the course of the war and perhaps the fate of humanity itself. The journey back to Earth was tense, filled with heated debates and soul-searching. Helix and Cipher, once at odds, found themselves united in their struggle to comprehend the alien's words. As they approached the Nemesis, Cipher turned to Helix. Captain, what we learned, it changes everything. How do we tell the Admiral? How do we tell humanity? Helix's jaw clenched. We tell them the truth. All of it. And then we figure out our next move. The debriefing with Admiral Frostrender was long and intense. The old warrior listened in silence as Helix and Cipher recounted their encounter, his face growing more grave with each passing minute. When they finished, Zircon stood and walked to the window, staring out at the stars. Gentlemen, he said finally, what you've brought us is both invaluable and potentially catastrophic. If what the alien said is true, we're not just fighting for our right to exist in the galaxy, we're fighting against a part of ourselves. He turned back to face them. But we can't just take their word for it. We need proof, and we need a way to combat this. Void hunger, if it exists. Obsidian. Quicks, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner, snapped to attention. Sir! I want you working with Cipher. Analyze every scrap of data we have on human history, looking for patterns that might corroborate the aliens' claims, and see if you can find any physiological or psychological markers that might indicate the presence of this parasite. Yes, Sir, Kix replied, shooting a nervous glance at Cipher. Stormweaver Zircon continued, I need you to prepare our forces for a two-front war. We can't let our guard down against the aliens, but we also need to be ready to face an enemy within. Helix nodded grimly. Understood, Admiral. But how do we know we can trust ourselves? If this void hunger is real, couldn't it be influencing our decisions even now? Zircon's eyes hardened. That, Captain, is the question that will determine the fate of our species. We must remain vigilant, questioning our motivations at every turn. But we cannot let paranoia paralyze us. Humanity has faced existential threats before, and we've always found a way to survive. We'll do so again. As the meeting adjourned, Cipher felt the weight of their discovery settling on his shoulders. He had always felt like an outsider due to his cybernetic enhancements, but now he wondered if those same enhancements might provide some protection against the void hunger's influence. Over the next few weeks, the Nemesis became a hive of activity. Quicks and Cipher worked tirelessly, sifting through historical data and developing new scanning technologies. Helix drilled the troops relentlessly, preparing them for battles both external and internal. And all the while, Admiral Frostrender grappled with the most difficult decision of his career, whether to reveal the truth to the rest of humanity's leadership, or to keep it confined to a select few who could be trusted to act on the information without succumbing to panic or despair. As Cipher delved deeper into the ship's historical archives, patterns began to emerge. Subtle at first, but growing more apparent as he refined his search algorithms. Inexplicable surges of violence throughout human history, often preceding major technological advancements. It was as if conflict itself was driving human progress, pushing the species towards the stars and towards self-destruction. Quick, Cipher called out, his voice hoarse from hours of non-stop analysis. I think I've found something. The xenotechnologist hurried over, his eyes widening as he took in the data on Cipher's screens. This can't be coincidence, Quicks muttered. But how do we prove it's not just human nature? Cipher's cybernetic eye whirred as he focused on a particular dataset. What if we could isolate the influence, find a way to block it somehow? Quicks's brow furrowed in thought. Maybe we could use your cybernetic implants as a starting point. If the void hunger is some kind of parasitic consciousness, it might have trouble interfacing with artificial systems. As they dove into this new line of research, tensions aboard the Nemesis were reaching a breaking point. Rumors of the alien encounter had spread, despite Admiral Frostrender's efforts to contain the information. Fights were breaking out among the crew with increasing frequency, and paranoia was running rampant. In the ship's training facilities, Captain Helix Stormweaver was pushing his troops to their limits. As he oversaw a particularly grueling combat simulation, one of his sergeants, a burly man named Raxon, approached him. Sir Raxon said, his voice low, "The men are talking. They say we're fighting the wrong enemy, that the real threat is here among us." Helix's eyes narrowed. "And what do you think, Sergeant?" Raxon hesitated, then squared his shoulders. "I think they might be right, sir. I've been having thoughts. Violent thoughts. More than usual. And I'm not the only one." Before Helix could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Admiral Frostrender's voice came over the intercom, "All hands to battle stations. We have multiple incoming vessels of unknown origin." As Helix raced to the bridge, he couldn't shake the feeling that this attack was more than just a coincidence. When he arrived, he found Zircon, Cipher, and Quicks already there, their faces grim. "Report," Zircon barked. "Sir," one of the tactical officers responded, "we're detecting 15 ships approaching at high speed. But their energy signatures are inconsistent. They're fluctuating wildly." Cipher stepped forward, his cybernetic implants interfacing with the ship's sensors. "Admiral," he said, his voice tight with concern, "those aren't alien ships. They're ours. Human ships." A hush fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. Zircon's face hardened. "It's happening," he said quietly. "The Void Hunger is making its move." As the enemy fleet drew closer, the crew of the Nemesis faced a chilling realization their greatest battle would not be against alien invaders, but against the darkness within their own hearts and minds. The bridge of the Nemesis was a maelstrom of activity as Admiral Zircon Frostrender barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos like a laser through the void. "Stormweaver, get our fighters out there. Defensive formation Zeta 9. Obsidian, I want every scrap of data you can get on those ships. Cipher, see if you can hack their systems. Find out who's really in control." As the crew sprang into action, Zircon turned to the tactical display, his mind racing. The approaching ships were a mix of UHDF vessels and civilian craft that had been retrofitted for combat, but their movements were erratic, almost feral. Sir Quix called out, his fingers flying over his console. "I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations from those ships. It's as if their power cores are on the verge of overload." Cipher's cybernetic eye whirred as he interfaced with the Nemesis's communications array. "Admiral, I've managed to tap into their comms. It's not good. The crews are in a frenzy. They're talking about feeding the hunger and embracing the void. It's like they've gone mad." Zircon's face hardened. "The Void Hunger," he muttered. "It's no longer content to manipulate from the shadows. It's taking direct control." Captain Helix Stormweaver's voice crackled over the intercom. "Sir, our fighters are in position, but the enemy isn't responding to hails. They're charging weapons. Orders." For a moment, the weight of command seemed to press down on Zircon's shoulders. These were human ships, crewed by men and women who, until recently, had been their allies. But the threat they posed was undeniable. "Defensive fire only," Zircon ordered. "Aim for weapons and engines. We need to disable them without destroying them if possible." As the space around the Nemesis lit up with weapons fire, Quix approached the Admiral, his face pale. "Sir, I've been analyzing the data from Cipher's implants and comparing it to the signals we're picking up from the enemy fleet. I think I might have a way to disrupt the Void Hunger's influence." Zircon's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Cipher's cybernetic systems seem to be resistant to the Void Hunger's control," Quix said. "If we can amplify that effect and broadcast it on a wide scale, we might be able to break its hold on the infected crews." "And how do you propose we do that?" Zircon asked. Quix swallowed hard. "The Callisto cannon, sir. If we reconfigure it to emit a specific frequency instead of a destructive beam, we could potentially create a disruption field large enough to cover the entire fleet." Cipher, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "It could work, Admiral, but the power requirements would be enormous. We'd be pushing the Nemesis to its limits." Zircon turned back to the tactical display, watching as his fighters desperately tried to contain the Berserk fleet without destroying them. He knew that every moment of delay meant more lives lost on both sides. "Do it," he ordered. "Stormweaver, have our fighters fall back to a defensive perimeter around the Nemesis. Obsidian, Voidwhisper, you have 1 hour to get that cannon reconfigured. After that, we make our stand." As Quix and Cipher raced off to begin their work, Zircon felt a presence at his side. It was Helix, his face streaked with sweat and grime from the ongoing battle. Sir Helix said quietly, "If this doesn't work, if we can't stop them." Zircon met his gaze steadily. "Then we do what we must to protect Earth and our remaining colonies, even if it means sacrificing our own." Helix nodded grimly and returned to coordinating the defense. For the next hour, the Nemesis shuddered under the assault of the corrupted fleet. Shields flickered, hull breaches were reported on multiple decks, and the medical bay was overwhelmed with casualties. But they held on, buying time for what might be their only chance at salvation. Finally, Cipher's voice came over the intercom. "Admiral, we're ready. The Callisto cannon has been modified to emit the disruption field, but I have to warn you, this is completely untested. We have no idea what the effects might be, especially on non-augmented humans." Zircon took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every life aboard the Nemesis and in the attacking fleet pressing down on him. "Understood. All hands brace for possible neural shock. Cipher, on my mark. Fire the Callisto cannon." As the massive weapon hummed to life, Zircon offered a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening in the cold vastness of space. Then, his voice firm and resolute, he gave the order that would determine the fate of humanity. "Fire." The Callisto cannon erupted with a silent fury, bathing the battlefield in a sea of shimmering energy. Unlike its original destructive purpose, this modified beam carried no physical force. Instead, it rippled through space, invisible waves washing over friend and foe alike. Aboard the Nemesis, the effect was immediate and disorienting. Crew members staggered, some crying out as they clutched their heads. Cipher, his cybernetic systems buzzing with feedback, collapsed to his knees, his human eye rolling back as his mechanical one flickered erratically. Admiral Zircon gripped the command console, fighting against a sudden vertigo that threatened to overwhelm him. Through blurred vision, he watched the tactical display, desperately searching for any sign that their gambit had worked. For several agonizing moments, nothing seemed to change. The enemy fleet continued its relentless assault, their weapons tearing into the Nemesis's weakening shields. Zircon felt a creeping despair. Had they failed? Had he just doomed his crew for nothing? Then, slowly at first, but with gathering speed, the tide began to turn. The erratic movements of the corrupted ships became even more chaotic, but in a different way. They were no longer coordinating their attacks. Some began to drift aimlessly, their weapons falling silent. Sir Helix called out, his voice strained but triumphant. "We're receiving hails from multiple enemy vessels. They're begging for help, saying they don't know where they are or what they've been doing." A ragged cheer went up from the bridge crew, quickly stifled as they remembered their discipline. Zircon allowed himself a small smile of relief before barking out orders. "Stormweaver, coordinate rescue operations. I want boarding teams on those ships ASAP. Secure their command decks and assist any crew members in distress. Obsidian, start compiling data on the effects of the disruption field. I want to know exactly what we've done and how long it will last." As the Nemesis shifted from defense to rescue, Zircon made his way to where Cipher was slowly regaining consciousness. He helped the cybernetics expert to his feet, noting the way Cipher's human eye seemed to focus while his mechanical one continued to twitch sporadically. "Report, Voidwhisper. What did you experience?" Cipher shook his head, as if trying to clear it. "It was intense, Admiral. Like 1,000 voices screaming in my head all at once. But then, silence. A silence I've never known before." He looked up at Zircon, his expression a mix of awe and fear. "I think we did more than just disrupt the void hunger, sir. I think we might have severed its connection to humanity entirely." Before Zircon could respond, alarms blared once again. Kix's voice, tinged with panic, came over the intercom. "Admiral, we're detecting a massive energy surge from the edge of the system. Something's coming through." All eyes turned to the main view screen as a colossal shape began to materialize. It was like nothing they had ever seen before. A writhing mass of darkness shot through with veins of sickly purple light. As it fully entered their space, a psychic scream tore through the minds of everyone aboard the Nemesis. Zircon, his face ashen but his voice steady, uttered the words that would mark the beginning of humanity's greatest battle. "All hands to battle stations. May whatever gods exist have mercy on our souls, because the void hunger itself has come to claim us." The entity that materialized before the Nemesis defied conventional description. It was as if a piece of the universe itself had been torn away, revealing the writhing chaos that lurked behind reality. Tendrils of dark energy lashed out, each touch causing sensors to overload and smaller ships to disintegrate. Admiral Zircon Frostrender stood at the center of the bridge, his face illuminated by the sickly glow of emergency lighting. Around him, his crew fought against panic and the invasive psychic presence that clawed at their minds. Obsidian Zircon barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Analysis." Quix, his hands shaking but his mind razor-sharp, pored over the incoming data. It's like nothing we've ever encountered, sir. Our sensors can barely make sense of it. But one thing's clear, it's not just a ship or a weapon. It's alive, and it's angry." Helix's voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral, our weapons are having no effect. It's as if the energy is being absorbed. Orders." Zircon's mind raced. They were outgunned, outmatched, facing an enemy they barely understood. But surrender wasn't an option, not with Earth and all of humanity at stake. "Cipher," he called out, "you said we severed its connection to humanity. Can we use that? Turn it against itself somehow." Cipher, still reeling from the aftereffects of the Callisto cannon, forced himself to focus. "Maybe. Yes. The disruption field, if we can modify it, amplify it, we might be able to create a feedback loop. Use its own energy against it. Do it, Zircon ordered. Stormweaver, coordinate with the rest of the fleet. I want every ship we have focusing fire on a single point. We need to create a weak spot for Cipher's modified field to penetrate. As the crew sprang into action, Zircon felt a presence in his mind. A voice, ancient and terrible, spoke directly into his thoughts. Why do you resist? We are your creation, born from the darkness in your hearts. Embrace us and know true power. Zircon gritted his teeth, pushing back against the invasive presence. We are more than our darkness, he growled. Humanity has faced extinction before, and we've always found a way to survive. We'll do so again, with or without your gifts. The voice laughed, a sound that sent chills down the spines of everyone who heard it. Brave words, little Admiral. But you cannot deny your true nature forever. We are eternal, and we are patient. Even if you defeat this form, we will wait. We will watch. And when you falter, we will be there to claim what is rightfully ours. Sir Quix's shout broke through Zircon's mental struggle. The modified disruption field is ready. But there's a catch. To generate enough power, we'll have to divert everything. Weapons, shields, life support, everything. Zircon looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of each crew member in turn. He saw fear there, yes, but also determination. Trust. They were ready to follow him, no matter the cost. Do it, he ordered. Helix, have the fleet fall back to minimum safe distance. We'll handle this ourselves. As the Nemesis prepared for its final gambit, the Void Hunger entity seemed to sense their plan. It surged forward, tendrils of dark energy reaching out to envelop the ship. Now, Cipher Zircon shouted. The modified Callisto cannon fired, a beam of pure disruption energy lancing out to meet the encroaching darkness. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a silent explosion of light and shadow, a shockwave rippled out from the point of contact. The Nemesis shuddered, systems overloading and shutting down, but the effect on the Void Hunger was catastrophic. The entity writhed and twisted, its form beginning to collapse in on itself. A psychic howl of pain and rage echoed through the minds of every human in the system. As emergency power kicked in, Zircon watched in awe as the monstrous being that had threatened all of humanity began to implode. In its death throes, it lashed out one final time, a tendril of pure void stuff punching through the Nemesis's hull and into the bridge. Zircon felt a searing pain in his chest as the tendril struck him, lifting him off his feet. As consciousness began to fade, he saw the entity disappear in a final flash of unlight, leaving behind nothing but empty space and a profound silence. His last thought before darkness took him was a prayer not for himself, but for the future of the species he had given everything to protect. 3 months after the battle that would come to be known as the Void Reckoning, a solemn ceremony was held on the partially rebuilt Nemesis. Admiral Zircon Frostrender, his chest still bandaged from the wound that had nearly claimed his life, stood before a gathering of military and civilian leaders from across human space. We stand here today. He began, his voice strong despite his weakened state, not to celebrate a victory but to acknowledge a new chapter in human history. The Void Hunger has been driven back, but not destroyed. Its influence on our species has been broken, but the potential for darkness remains within each of us. He paused, looking out at the faces before him, human faces, marked by the strain of recent events but alive with hope and determination. Our task now is twofold. We must rebuild, stronger and wiser than before, but we must also remain vigilant. The stars are no longer a beacon of hope alone, but a reminder of the threats that lurk in the darkness between them. Zircon gestured to the men standing beside him, Helix, Cipher, and Quix, each bearing their own scars from the conflict. To that end, I am announcing the formation of a new organization, the Eternal Watch. Captain Stormweaver will lead our defense forces, ever ready to protect our worlds from external threats. Cipher Voidwhisper and Quix Obsidian will head a new research division, dedicated to understanding and countering any resurgence of the Void Hunger's influence. As the ceremony concluded and the gathered leaders dispersed to begin the work of reconstruction, Zircon found himself alone on the observation deck. He stared out at the stars, those distant points of light that had once represented humanity's future and now served as a reminder of its most terrible trial. A presence at his side drew his attention. It was Cipher, his cybernetic eye now repaired but somehow changed, glowing with an inner light that hadn't been there before. "You feel it too, don't you?" Cipher asked quietly. Zircon nodded. The silence. The peace. I'd forgotten what it was like to not have that constant whisper of darkness in the back of my mind. "It's not gone entirely," Cipher warned. "I can still sense echoes, ripples in the void. Our victory bought us time, but the war isn't over." "No," Zircon agreed, turning back to the star-filled vista before them. "But for the first time in longer than I can remember, I have hope. Real hope. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. As one people, united not by fear or hatred, but by the best parts of our nature." As the Nemesis cruised through the silent depths of space, carrying the seeds of humanity's future and the guardians of its hard-won peace, Admiral Zircon Frostrender allowed himself a small smile. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but he was ready. They all were. The void hunger had awakened humanity to its true potential, and in doing so it had ensured its own eventual defeat. For as long as there were stars in the sky and hope in human hearts, the darkness would never truly win.